Okay, today I'm talking about Havel and how it was pronounced. I'll go over like the origin of it and like stuff like that. Um, so first off, the origin. It's pretty common sound. It's the most common place you'll see it is in places where Proto-Germanic had this "h" sound, like as in I gave the example "chaviano," which becomes Havan or well, I mean, mainly I'm talking about like the disagreement about how some people would think this is pronounced Chavan, Chavan. But I would recommend saying it Havan, and I'll get into why later. You also have some cases where it's from a G um, or a G sound, so Ganugano becomes Ganohan. And there's also this thing that goes at the ends of some words. It's like a hua, and that gets delabelized to ha as well. So you have the word yah. Um, and I'm not the best at pronouncing this myself. I might say yah when I want to say it ha, yah, yah. It's difficult for me to say, but that doesn't. So just know that when I say that, that's not necessarily the correct pronunciation. Okay, so it can also come in through Greek and Latin. Greek and Latin, I mean, it can sometimes be hard to tell whether it's from Greek or Latin specifically. Mostly it's from Greek, but like mostly if you see a loan word, it'll be through Greek. But sometimes you see words from Latin, especially like more. Words that come in more colloquially, from average people loaning it into the language versus educated speakers tend to loan from Greek more. And here you can see these various, some of these should look familiar. Bethlehem, Herod, Abraham. So, these are places we have ha as well, for the most part. Uh, Then I'm going to talk about this other letter, which is important for understanding Ha, which is Ingus, and Ingus is looks like an X. It's not pronounced like an X. Don't say Xeristus or anything like that. It's not Eucharistia. It's Eucharistia. Eucharistia. Um, and we know it was probably pronounced as a "k," since it's mostly uh, well, the words that we have with this English are more. Most of them are more often written with a "k." With this, I think I can't remember what it was called. Maybe like corn or something. Um, but it doesn't really matter what the name of the letter is. This I'll just call it K or whatever. I'll use the English names of the equivalents. So this X is not a, like I said, it's not a Latin X, it's a Greek K or Ch in later Koine Greek. And most of these, well, like these Gothic loanwords are all from, Koine Greek. They're not from ancient Greek, which you can see. But the only word that consistently uses an X or an Ingus is Christus. Now, I'm not exactly sure how long the vowel should be there. It's usually written Christus with a short I, and that can be backed up by this Galiur Christus. But in the Greek, this is can be reconstructed with a long I. So what's up with that? I'm not exactly sure the reason for that, but it's typically reconstructed Christus. Then we have th and the, which uh, are found very often in native words, but also sometimes in these Greek and Latin words. Um, so you have Bethlehem, like I said earlier, has that the, and Yosef has the fa, Yosef, not Yosef. And this is interesting because in ancient Greek, these were all pronounced, you had pa, ta, ka, with a lot of aspiration. But in later Koine Greek, these became the same sounds as they are in Gothic. So fa, tha, and ha. And now that last one, ha, is the same one, ha. And they're writing that with a k. They're not writing it h. They're not writing Christus. They're not, or Christus. Um, if if Gothic had a ch sound, which was the same as the Greek ch at the same time, it's kind of strange that they would choose to write it. Um, would they would make this distinction with h and use both h and ch in loan words, but they're using h, and this is the same letter they use for their native words for the uh, the h sound, but for the ch sound, they are using a different letter, or they're using the letter for k. Um, Either way, they're not using it for the same letter they use for native words with this h sound. They're specifically using the ch letter, the ingus, or they're using a k. Um, they they are not doing the same thing for Yosef. They're writing it with the F, and they're writing this Bethlehem with a thorn. They're not writing it Bethlehem, which you might see in, I don't know, some other languages. Like, I think Old English has those with a T. I'm not sure exactly. Um, but in classical and in classical Greek, this was a ta, and pa, pa, ta, and ka. But they're being written fa and tha, and these are the same letters that are being used in native words for fa and tha. We do see some alteration between h and g, which is not at all surprising. After all, in Proto-Germanic, the sound was reconstructed as a ch, which would be the devoiced equivalent of a g, uh, and these alternations likely existed already in Proto-Germanic, as we can see with Old English. We get mag versus mauchte, and Gothic mag, machta. So this isn't really that surprising that we um, see it reflected in Gothic, since if there was a change from ch to h, well, then it could have changed here as well. The biggest reason to believe that um, it wasn't ch, is the fact that we have remember these fa and th. Well, they're actually used uh, for the devoiced versions of uh, the and the. So we have goths for good. We have go, and that's specifically masculine singular. Then roda for feminine singular. Goth for neuter singular. And we have hlefs, hleva, hlef, and we do occasionally see goths and roth, and we see hlevs and hleva and hlev. Now, whether this actually represents that those like sounds were still voiced, I kind of doubt that. Um, I think what they're doing is just writing those by analogy, because we do have the rotha, So they're occasionally writing it as roths and roth and hlevs and hleva, even though they, could be pronouncing them. Oh, I wrote hleva here, but I didn't. I should have either written rotha and hleva, or I should have gotten rid of the both of them, but whatever. But what's interesting is despite we have this clear pattern, it doesn't exist for a. Instead, we have dags, daga, but dag, da, dags, daga, dag. And this should be this h sound, h, dag. But it's written with a g. And this is always. So whereas occasionally we get roz, we always get dag. So the thing that we usually see, we never see for a ga. And we have some evidence that the Bible was translated by different scribes or whatever, um, but none of them write da. None of them write it with a. None of them write it with an ingus. None of them write it with a hal. And now you might say, oh, why don't they write it with an ingus? If that's the sound it made, then surely it's the same. But the thing about Ingus is we never see it in native words, and when we see it in foreign words, it's a k. Now, this I think can be explained pretty tidily with the fact that this this h sound never appears at the beginning of a word. Um, it always appears as in complete like you know uh complementary distribution is the word I'm thinking of. With r. So it's in some places you get r, in some places you get h, but there's no place in which both of them can be. And it seems that the Goths were hearing this h sound when it didn't appear and in a place where g could appear as a k. And Uh, that could be the case. It seems like it most likely was. There doesn't seem to be a better explanation for that. Um, but if huh was this actually a huh, then why are these sounds and these sounds treated differently? It doesn't really add up. We also have some places. Now, you might see ma macht with a gamma, a G, or a Riva, if you want to use the Gothic name, um, as the second person singular of Maran. Um, this was likely due to analogy. Whether it represents a different pronunciation is hard to tell. I would say that it does, because, this could easily be, um, it could be analogy in spelling, but it could also be analogized in the pronunciation. And if we're seeing that maran, you put a t at the end and you get this is very could very easily be analogized from the other forms of the word. The same verb maran has in the past tense. I'm pretty sure it does with machta with an h. um, This could be explained by the fact that the other past forms, like there's no past form with the, but there's most of the present forms have so I think it's easy to see how that could happen. Um, let's see. We also have words like sech, sex, 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 It's really hard for me to say that with a huh sound, but presumably, Goths could say it with a huh. I'm an English speaker. I don't have huh in that place, so like I said, I wouldn't use, my pronunciation as an example of like the absolute correct way to say it, or like, oh, if I can't say it, then it's impossible to say. And generally, I would apply that to your own, pronunciation. You can't just say, oh, well, this doesn't sound natural, so they probably didn't do it that way. No, I mean, like languages differ in what's, easy to pronounce for them. There are loads of things in English which are hard to pronounce for like Spanish or Japanese speakers, etc. Um, so that's not really surprising if I can't really say huh after a vowel very easily. Um, but in any case, we never see sex uh, with written with a which we might expect to see if there was some confusion with it. We never see it with the English either, for likely the same reason, like I said. Um, Another thing is we have this change of ei and u to e and o. This also happens between ra and wa, but I'm, just focusing on ha right now. So we have wichtes becomes wechts, not wichts. We have fuho becoming foho, not fuho. Um, and the same change happens between before ra and wa, and that's interesting because ra is voiced. What else is voiced to ra? And ra is just the voiced version of of ha, but we don't see the sound change happening with ra. Now, why this would work for one voiced sound and one velar fricative sound, but not for the voiced velar fricative, kind of suggests that the pronunciation of huh was, different than that it wasn't actually happening between a velar fricative sound, that it was happening between before, gosh, what is H even called? It's some like, not pharyngeal. I don't think it's laryngeal either. Um, but it's something like that. I don't have all of those terms memorized. Um, but I gave some examples. It becomes regenyan, not regenyan. It becomes wex, not wex. We get huyan, not horian. Now, whereas, depending on when devoicing happened, this would be the same as h, as this h, or like whether it happened before or after this vowel loss. Uh, you could potentially explain this by saying, oh, well, it must have happened really early, so you had Oegas becoming Wigas, and then by the time it became Wix, it was no longer productive. And, you know, uh, maybe that's the case. Um, then we have, okay, so I had some trouble finding the Gothic names. These were the three that I could find. Like, but I think there were some other ones. You might have to look. I couldn't find them on Wikipedia, but maybe you can find them. And if you can find any Gothic name spelled with CH, I'd really appreciate it if you'd let me know. Uh, all the ones I could find, or at least these three, either have an H or they have nothing. They don't have the CH. If you look at Frankish, you can see Ragna, Har, or yeah, and you have Hararik, Hildebert, Haribert, and Hilperik. and we have this Hilpericus from Gothic, but Hilperik, or perhaps pronounced Hilperik by actual Latin speakers. Why then are they, writing these names differently? If they were both H, why do we only see H for the Frankish ones? Um, Maybe you can also, if some other languages, old Germanic languages, how they were loaned, like how the names were transliterated in Latin. And you could let me know about that. That'd be nice. Um, but from what I could find, you see this clear distinction and this isn't even all of the Frankish names. They're always written with this k sound, the ch, um, but never with a h. And overall, I think there's a lot of things which need explaining if the letter that was written, like a Latin H, instead of a Greek chi, I think you can explain that by saying, oh well, maybe the dialect of Greek had this really conservative k, but f and th had already become f th. Um, it just seems a lot simpler, and you don't need to jump through all these hoops to just say, okay, it was huh. Another thing which I didn't mention, if we go back to ya, we see that it assimilates to the following sound. I can't remember if we see this happening with ra, even though it should be the same if it is ha. Uh, why we don't see it assimilate to the next word is kind of hard to explain. Um, Typically, weaker sounds like huh after a vowel are more likely to assimilate to something later than a harder sound like a fricative, um, which you know uh, we don't see assimilate as much. Um, this suggests to me that the sound was weaker. It was more likely to assimilate to the next sound versus them just arbitrarily deciding that, oh yeah, the letter written with the Latin H that can assimilate to the next sound, but the letter written with the Greek gamma that's not going to assimilate with the next sound. Um, but I mean, a lot of these things could be explained if we just assume that the Goths made a lot of arbitrary decisions and that Greek was the dialect of Greek just happened to be conservative for one sound, but not conservative for the others. I I find that position. I mean, for most things with phonetics, y- there's like an explanation which makes the most sense, and then there's an explanation which requires you to jump through all these hoops, and that's what I think it is with with her and her, where we don't get any indication that the Goths had a ch, but we get loads of indicating factors that show it was probably a h.